Hello friends. Good to have you on board. My name is Dan, and this is Daily Art Adventure number 585. Read it and weep. I am doing another illustration upstairs in my studio. It's been quite the day. Oh my goodness, not at all what I expected to do. Some of you know that I did a wedding a week ago Saturday. Brought it home with me. It was one of my signature series, which means I really focus on making a good portrait. Well, I thought I was done. This morning I started making a video about the process and then discovered, oh my goodness, I am not done at all. So I went back, spent all day today, 8 hours editing, refining, correcting that wedding portrait that I thought was done. That's kind of embarrassing because I thought I was done. And I was hoping shortly after that to be down in my garage working on my big painting. Anyway, these are the woes. It reminds me of the bumper sticker that said a bad day, a bad day sailing is better than a good day, bad day fishing, bad day golfing. Well, a bad day doing artwork is still better than a whole lot of other days. So I have nothing to complain about. I usually say, I can't complain. Then I think about it, well, I really can. Do you want to hear me? I don't have any right to complain. All right, let me get down to business. So here's what I'm doing today. I am doing another one of these cute little illustrations for a book. In this technique, I've done 3 or 4 of them now. This was an experiment. Didn't like that technique quite as well. This is a redo of the first one. I like that pretty much. And then this is one that I'm replacing. All right, so my client, kind of typical client, if you will, doesn't exactly know what he wants. And it's a real tricky business. I doubt that very many of you... Okay, let me turn on my light table. And explain a few things. Here is the pencil drawing that I did. And at first my client did not approve of it. Oh wait, that's not the right one, is it? Hang on. Yeah, no, that's not the right one. Sorry. Boy, glad, don't want to get... Anyway, it's this one. At first he did not approve of this particular illustration. But then the further we went in the process, after doing a final of another viewpoint, pose, I should say, he wasn't entirely happy with the finished product. So, and the question is, well, should I have pushed him harder? And I do not know the answer. The answer is very possibly I should have, but speaking of anatomy drawing, we were speaking about that, weren't we? Speaking of, I actually started out the day working on a class that I thought I was going to be teaching in a couple weeks on anatomy. In the course of the day, that has been changed. So if any of you want to attend one of my classes, it's happening the last week of April. So that's just 4 weeks away. Last week of April in Wilmington, back to Wilmington, North Carolina, where I'm going to do, I'm pretty sure I'm going to do a class. It's going to be either, so it's not figures. It was going to be figurative, but now it's not. It's either going to be the secret sauce for landscape painting or painting landscapes that pack a punch. Either way, it's just a couple of cute ways to try to get people excited about signing up for a class. And so I If you live in this part of the country and you want to send me an email, send me a text, by all means, let me know, and I'll put you in touch with the organizers of this class. Anyway, speaking of anatomy drawing, since that's what I'm doing now, first thing I did this morning actually was a little bit of research and discovered that in my humble opinion, and usually after people say something like that, I say something really arrogant, but I'm actually not going to this time. I really am just giving my opinion. The 3 best anatomy books of the last century. I'm sure there could be lots of difference of opinion on that subject, but just for what it's worth, again, I believe the 3 best figure drawing how-to books of the last 100 years, ironically, are all available online for free if you just do enough searching. So let me tell you what they are. One of them is Jack Ham. Here, I have them, I think, right here somewhere. I'm standing up looking at my book. Yep, here we go. Here's book number 1. If I had to name one as the best book, it would be this one. He worked in the 60s, so a lot of his style, fashion style, are very 60s looking. So you have to get over that. The reason, it's Jack Amp, the reason this is the best book, even though it's not the thickest, is he uses the most mnemonic devices. Do you know that word? Mnemonic. M as in mother, N as in Nancy, E-M-O-C, mnemonic. The M is silent. Mnemonic devices. That's tricks for remembering things. There's an awful lot to remember. One of these days, I was looking through this today and thought, this guy is just brilliant. Just brilliant. And I want to draw, someday I would love to draw every single drawing in this book, just for my own benefit. But you can download this absolutely free as a PDF. You can put it on your phone, you can put it on your computer, your laptop, your iPad, whatever. That's book number 1. Book number 2, I don't have. I just ordered it today, but it's the companion piece to this one. Andrew Loomis. This is Drawing the Head and Hands. The other book is Figure Drawing for All It's Worth by Andrew Loomis. And this man, likewise, he is an absolute freak of nature. Just all of these faces are out of his head. I mean, I want you to think about that. All of these faces are, well, did I just see Mark Twain fly by a second ago? Which would mean, no, it just kind of looks like Mark Twain. Anyway, and packed with great information, not so big on the mnemonic devices. But man, if you just draw every picture, you understand you don't get much benefit by looking at these things. You get the benefit by drawing them. So that's pretty good analysis. Anyway, so that's number 2. But he's got one, the companion to this is Figure Drawing for All It's Worth. I ordered a used copy of it for $25, but you can download this book and the figure one, both free. This might cost you $2 to get a PDF. I'm not sure, but I paid $2 for one version, and I think I got the other one free. And then the third book, while we're on the subject, the 3 best books in the last 100 years for figure drawing. And this is number 3, is George Bridgman, Life Drawing. And you can also download this for free. He taught at the Art Student League of New York for many, many, many years. He worked in the 20s. Andrew Loomis worked in the 40s, and Jack Ham worked in the 60s. So this book here is 100 years old. The the brilliance, the genius of George Bridgman is that he over-angulates all the nips and tucks and bumps and creases of the human body, which makes it then easier to memorize. So that's his particular genius. See what he does here? Compares it to furniture, literally. Also, what Bridgman does that is correct is he focuses primarily on the male form, on the male figure, because if you can draw a male figure, you can draw a female. It does not work the other way around. So if you want to learn how to draw a human being, draw the male, and George Bridgman does that right, in my opinion. So, and because you can easily adapt and adopt to draw a female, but it doesn't work. If you could draw women, doesn't mean you can draw men. But if you draw men, you can draw women. That's just an artistic oddity. All right, so we were talking about figure drawing, weren't we? All right, why are we talking about figure drawing? Because that's what I'm doing here again, and I'm okay at it. I'm not fantastic. I would like to get fantastic. That would require me to do more homework and draw things like those books I just showed you. Okay, that's why I was showing you the books. And you may have noticed there that Jack Ham even dedicates a significant portion of his book, 10 or 15 pages at the end of his book, to drawing clothing. And I was looking at that in particular this morning. And again, he's just genius, just brilliant. As I draw that shoe, I'm reminded of Jack Ham in his book that I was looking at this morning. He says, nothing shows age, wear and tear, and human effort like shoes. So if you want to like your character to look like they're hardworking, as that's exactly what I'm doing here. And he even talked about how the sole at the front of the shoe will turn up slightly more if it's an old worn out shoe. Okay, so that's Jack Ham. Again, just all of those guys are just freaks of nature, geniuses, and much indebted to them for their work. The only one of those three books that I have drawn every illustration in it is the George Bridgman. I did that many years ago and enjoyed it immensely, and would like to do it again. Not that I'd like to do it to a different book, not the same book. I derived much benefit. This was 2005, so yeah, 14 years ago that I did every illustration in George Bridgman. Now let me need to look at. Oh yeah, my client asked for another figure in this illustration. There, so that's the proverbial hind end of a horse, I guess, with a man behind it. Hey, real quick, here's a way of drawing foliage, trees, a way of drawing a tree line. Shortcut. Number one, do a squiggly line, first going one direction, then come back and doing another direction. See, so that gives you an edge. Then the third thing you do is come back and draw leaves that are escaping. Okay, their stems are so thin that you can't see them against the sky. So little dots outside. And then thirdly, sky holes, especially near the boundary. So that's one way. And then another sky hole or two. Down in the body of the tree. And finally, because this is a arable plowed field, two layers of foliage down here. That is near. These bushes are closer. These trees are slightly further away, a few feet. All right, so and this is going to be, of course, in color. Now, the technique that I'm doing today, I've talked about quite a bit. It's a knockoff of, whoops, he doesn't have an ear. He might complain about that. It's a version or a perversion of Chris Payne's technique. Who's Chris Payne, or C.F. Payne? Just Google him. You can find him, C.F. Payne. Very, very famous illustrator. And we were in the Dallas Society of Illustrators together 30 years ago. We're like this. We're like this. We're best of buds. That's a joke. I'm assuming you can tell that. Oh, good, and I already gave some thought to which way the light should be coming from here. So I can do a little bit of simple shading. For those of you that may have to leave before I finish this illustration, tell you quickly the technique, the outline. So after doing a simple and fairly loose illustration in black colored pencil. Oh, by the way, here's a gizmo, a thing worth buying. Look how short this pencil is. It'd be virtually impossible to use it. It'd be very uncomfortable to use it. So they sell, this is made by Creative Mark, they sell pencil extensions. So you can put on, now I had to wrap some Scotch tape around this to make it tight, but this slides up and grips the pencil snugly. And then I can use my pencils all the way down to the bloody end. I don't know why they're bloody. I can use it all the way down. So that's a little art gizmo worth buying. Rats. Broke a fingernail today. I'm worse than women. Sorry, I know that's a sexist comment, but when I tell the rest of the statement, you know what I mean. Many women, a lot of women I know don't like to break their fingernails, but they're doing it, they're upset because of aesthetics. I hate breaking fingernails because I play classical guitar. I get comments every once in a while on my videos about, cut your fingernails. And I always know that I'm talking to a plebe. Most of you don't know what a plebe is, and that's just fine, because they've all been insulted. Yeah. Most people have never known a classical guitar player up close. So they might know of country, folk, rock and roll, but they probably don't know classical. And classical and just enough flamenco and classical and jazz to be dangerous. Anyway, that's why I have long fingernails on my right hand, like that, and very short on my left. I know I'm just blessing you, making your day. This artist is so weird. He shows us his fingernails while he's drawing. Oh, I started to tell you. Okay, what happens after the black colored pencil? I'm going to loosely paint the whole thing with acrylics mixed with what's that white stuff? Mixed with gesso. I couldn't remember the word gesso. Whew! Creeping Alzheimer's. I think as long as you're worried that you might have Alzheimer's, you don't. So I'm going to paint in very flat colors. You use the gesso because you want the acrylic paint to have a little bit of a tooth to it. So you don't want it slick like plain, normal acrylic. So you mix it with gesso so you get some grit. After that, after the acrylic, I'm going to do a wash of brown watercolor over the entire painting. Just big brush, brown. Dries in a few minutes. And then lift out the watercolor with a damp brush, a damp Q-tip, something. Then I spray it with a very rough workable fixative, and then finish with pastel pencils like this. And then, possibly optional, do white gouache highlights. There you go. So anyway, pencil, acrylic, watercolor, pastel pencil, white gouache. That's why I'm calling it mixed media illustration. This illustration is for a book. It's a biography of Major James Coker of South Carolina. The reason he's got a crutch is he took a musket ball to his hip, shattered his hip in the Civil War. Sherman came through and burned his farm, stole everything, but one old horse that was not worth stealing, and a couple bags of seed. So from that meager start, having nearly lost his life, he went on to become a very successful businessman and philanthropist in the state of South Carolina. And his great-grandson is writing the book and paying me to do these illustrations. Very inspiring. Yeah, and I think I'll do another big cloud, kind of adding a heroic pyramid shape to the illustration. That vertical triangle shape, and a couple birds just for fun. All right, I'm going to take a quick break. All right, welcome back. So this is the flat Not, in other words, not highly modeled painting. Just slap it down fast. Acrylics. And with a little bit of gesso in it so that it has tooth. And acrylics, when applied in this manner, that is to say fairly thin, not plastered on fat, but rendered fairly thinly. Acrylics applied in this manner, of course, are translucent. You can see through them, and we are going to use that function considerably in this, using this technique. Again, I'm calling it a version or a perversion of C.F. Payne's, C.F. Payne, P-A-Y-N-E, very, very, very well-known illustrator in America. I do the first 4 steps, I think, 3 or 4 of his steps, and then take a detour off on my own. I've done several illustrations. In fact, if you go to my YouTube channel, I have a playlist of about I can't remember, a dozen maybe, a dozen videos where I'm experimenting with Chris Payne's, C.F. Payne's technique. And the only reason I'm not doing his full-on technique is when I did the first illustration for this book, I did it in this style. Here's a finished illustration, and my client liked it. So, and why did I decide to incorporate pastel pencils instead of oil paint the way Chris does it? I have not got the foggiest idea why I did that. It was just because I'm an artist and I'm creative, and I'm always trying something new. So. I am violating what I just told you a few minutes ago when I said that there was no modeling, no shading to speak of in this stage of the process. And here I am belying that statement. And as you can see, doing a little bit of shading there. So there you go. You just can't stop a creative person. They always want to experiment. That's a pretty true statement. That's a pretty apt description of me. All right, I think I'm going to proceed in a very traditional manner and just move forward and do the trees. Whoops, that's too dark and it's too green. Okay, Both of those are easily fixed. Add more white gesso. And part of the genius of Chris's technique is that you get to draw with a pencil, which most people would acknowledge as a pretty intuitive and quick way to draw. I mean, you can draw with pen, you can draw with brushes, you can draw with all kinds of things, but come on, pencils, everybody knows it's a very immediate, very direct medium. I realize now that it's been a while since I did a CF Payne illustration, and I think I might have done my pencil a little bit too light, a little bit too pale. It's better on the man. Anyway, there's several advantages or brilliant aspects to Chris's technique. As I was saying, one is that you get to draw with a pencil, which is intuitive, fast, and easy. And you don't have to belabor the pencil drawing because it's going to be covered up, but it's not going to be completely covered up. In other words, the acrylic paint is going to dry translucent and allow some of the pencil to show through, but not very much, just a little bit. When you look at Chris Payne's illustrations, you wouldn't necessarily guess, by looking at them, you wouldn't guess that they were all started with a black line drawing. I think sometimes maybe he uses a dark brown pencil. I can't remember right now. It's been a while since I did those studies. But whether he does or not, that would be a good option to consider, doing the initial drawing in a very, very dark brown colored pencil, just because you'd get a little bit more warmth in the drawing then. All right, done with that layer. Now, the closer trees they're younger trees, newer leaves, so they're a paler green compared to the mama trees behind them. Does that make sense? My painting, again, part of the genius of Chris's technique, the painting that I'm doing right now does not need to be perfect. Close is good enough. All right, now the foreground, the ground, in fact, fore and ground, is going to be brown. So I'm mixing up a couple browns here with the white, gesso. Let's just really slap this stuff down here fast. getting lighter as we recede toward the horizon. I would like to hear about it. If anybody out there decides to try either this technique, or if I can steer you over to Chris Payne, the fountainhead of this technique, I'd love to hear how it goes and see what you think. Are there any illustrators out there looking for a new challenge? Right? Retire that brush. And for what it's worth, you painters, all of that was done with a 1-inch flat. Encouraging you to always use the largest brush possible. I have a set here of really cheap brushes. I like them. I like them because they were cheap and because they worked pretty well. All right, now let's some details. I have to start deciding colors. What color is his hat? Yeah, it's brown. It's either leather or straw. I might decide which of those later. But at the moment, brown in either case. Let's add a little bit more chroma to that and proceed to do his flesh tone. It feels a little dark to me. So you can see how I'm free to paint right over the details on his face, for instance. Let me zoom in for a second so you can see. Because this paint will get even more transparent as it dries. So I can still see his eyes, edge of his nose, and the fingers and so forth through this acrylic gesso mix. His shoes are also brown. Not a lot of exciting color happening so far in this painting. And his crutch is a yellowish brown, pale, new wood color. So we'll get that knocked out. And the handle of his hoe, slightly darker brown. Once again, I can paint it very quickly. Don't have to worry about shading. And the little bit of shading that I did in pencil will continue to show through. All right, let's do some gray, definite gray for the blade of his. That's too dark. I'll come back and modify that shortly. All right, now what color is a little thing on the end of his crutch? I'll make that gray. I don't know why, just because I've got gray. Okay, his coveralls are going to be blue. I don't know if they had blue jeans back then, but if I make them blue, I don't think anybody will complain. And I don't think anybody will say, hey, they didn't have blue denim. Well, this guy did. This is 1870, sometime before 1870. And his shirt, I don't know. White. If I do white, it'll be blue shadows. It's yellow, orange, red. Oh, his beard also is dark. Client has made that quite clear to me that he had a dark beard. Well, let's do the big stuff first. Let's get the getting a little bit of noise. Hang on. There we go. Again, the fact that you're able to paint really quickly without worrying about details makes this a very fast technique. Chris makes much of that point, rightly so, in his videos where he discusses this technique. All illustration work, almost all illustration work is done, frankly, at breakneck speed. I was an illustrator for many years. Still do, obviously I still do some illustration. That's what this is. But it was my full-time job for many years. And a typical phone call from an art director at an ad agency is, "Hello, Dan. Got an illustration for you. Need it by noon tomorrow." And it might be as late as 5 o'clock. Yes. That is true. Once again, graduate to a smaller brush. Let's do the shadow part of his shirt. So yeah, I think it's going to be a white shirt. I'm afraid if I got fancy and did some color, I would just really regret it. So play it safe. It'll be a little bit monochromatic, but I'd rather have monochrome than disaster. So there you go. Now, one of the things I learned when I was practicing playing with Chris's technique is that at the end of this acrylic stage, acrylic phase, acrylic layer, you have to have acrylic paint on everything. In other words, like I can't just, the white part of the cloud, I can't just leave it bare paper. I'm working on Bristol board, by the way, single ply, thin Bristol board. And his shirt, I can't leave white. There's a little bit of white still showing down there. Let me hit that real quickly while I'm here. The reason is if you don't cover it up, the watercolor that you put on next will behave in a very different manner on the exposed paper. It's not a good look. And the exception I'm making is the corners, because that's just a vignette effect. All right. Let's go ahead then and do some of that pure gesso. Okay, here's this shirt. Oh, just for fun, I'm going to do a little bit on his hat, even though, as I said, this technique does not generally require or presuppose any modeling at all. But I just did some on the hat, just like I did some in the sky a little while ago. So I would get kicked out of the CF Paint Good Boy Club for those infractions. That's all right. I didn't pay very much for the secret decoder ring anyway. Darn thing didn't even work. Another factor, another reason that this is a brilliant technique. Again, I'm talking about Chris Payne's technique, not mine. Part of the genius of it is that it automatically incorporates a reasonable amount of accident, surprise. You don't exactly know what it's going to look like. And when you, again, if you look at Chris Payne's work, you'll see this delightful texture that all his illustrations have this subtle speckled look. And the speckled look is a byproduct of the technique. And he does not control the speckledness, as far as I can tell. I mean, it's not like he, sticks out his tongue and create some kind of speckle on purpose. No, it happens just automatically in the course of applying all his different layers. And as I said, I'm going to, yeah, this feels good. It's nice, the stuff that's dry, it's nice and scratchy. Having cheated once, then twice, I'm going to now cheat 3 times by doing some modeling. I'm using that word. I know, forgive me for overpronouncing all those words. Just want to make it clear what I'm saying sometimes. Cheating again a little bit, doing a little bit of halftone indicating the furrows in the field. Okay, the only thing pretty much left to paint is the man pulling the mule. And once again, I'm going to have to retreat to a smaller brush size to accomplish that. That head's a little big. I'll fix that later. I don't know if I should have tried to get tricky and do a shadow there. That was a mistake. I won't worry about it. There's a lot of stuff I'm not worrying about. Just you get the impression. Yeah, but let me. I'm going to change my mind. I am going to do a shadow under this man up close. Once again, I'm cheating. This is not germane to the technique. This is me tweaking the technique slightly, simply because I've got these colors, an easy mix here on my paper plate, and I'm thinking, I bet I can slap down some shading really quickly and save even a little bit of time even in the next step a little bit. Yeah, and I'm glad I did that. I've already got a strong sense of light and shadow dimension happening there. Oh, I never did his beard. That's important. I'm cheating all over the place now. Send me the art police. Be pounding on my door any minute. All right. I know what I want to do. I'm going to add a little edge of dark at the base of these trees. Really mixing up a real hodgepodge mess of stuff here. Yeah. Again, I don't believe this is the Chris Payne approved technique. I may be wrong about that. He spends a lot of time in his instructional videos talking about how to render faces. He doesn't, and I have not found anywhere where he spends much time talking about the backgrounds. So we're kind of left on our own trying to figure out how he does that. So that's my excuse. But that's good enough. All right, now the fun starts. Oh, not too soon though. I made this mistake before. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So I have to make sure that these acrylics are thoroughly dry before I put the watercolor. I wonder how I learned that lesson. Yeah, that was exciting. All right, so I'm going to pause there and be back in just a few minutes to do the watercolor layer. That's when it starts getting really fun. All right, thanks for watching. All right, I'm back. That didn't take long. And here we go. Watercolor brown over the whole thing. I want to slap it down really quickly. As soon as I manage to get an even coat of brown, I'm going to quit brushing. I want it the right color, right intensity. I feel like it could be slightly darker than that. So let me intensify this mixture just a little bit. All right, that's good enough. Now forgive me, I'm going to blow an air dryer right in your ear. Forgive me. Phew, all right. Sorry about that horrible noise. Now, this next stage is really fun. Just give me for a moment. I step across the room and grab several things. A little container of clean water. Not clean enough to drink, you understand. Just clean. Okay, I'm done with the acrylics. I'm done with watercolor and put both of those out of my way. So I have here just a little container of water and any number of brushes that I want. And it seems to me I have discovered in the past that a couple bristle brushes. So here's my tools at the moment. I'll let you know if that, oh, and then a roll of toilet paper. I'm going to start out with a large brush. Back to the 1 inch. Just getting it damp. And then start lifting out, wetting the watercolor, of course. Watercolor reactivates very easily, as every watercolorist knows, often to their chagrin. So here's where a lot of the shading comes into play, controlled by how intensely I rub and lift out, how many times I re-wet the watercolor, and how intensely I rub it, so on and so on and so forth. So I have a lot of control over how much watercolor gets lifted off the painting. But it's not that dreaded control freak kind of control. Do you know what I mean? And I'm going to definitely lift some off this blue. Again, for those of you who perhaps won't be able to stay with me for the whole process, after doing this, I go downstairs outside to my garage. I'm going to spray this illustration with a good coat of lacquer mat. Now, there's a problem. I need to look. The last I knew, lacquer mat was no longer being sold anywhere. It's left over from my old airbrush days. I learned about it from Drew Blair 25 years ago or more. And they have stopped making it. Now, what I don't know is what have they, whoever they is, what have they replaced it with? And I do not know. But let me describe for you the characteristics. Lacquer mat is a workable fixative with the accent emphasis on workable. It's a very rough. It's a lacquer mat. It smells to high heaven. No doubt that's why they stopped making it and why I only spray it outdoors, of course. So it's very toothy, very, very toothy fixative. Anyway, so that's what I spray it with. Then come back after it off guesses for a while. Come back up to my studio here and do pastel pencils. Kind of funny. I've turned into an artist who uses obscure pencils. That is to say, two pencils that other people don't use a whole lot. Watercolor pencils and pastel pencils. Now, I know pastel artists use pastel pencils, but it's only as a, as an accent for details. And then, after the pastel pencils, with a brush, I will use a little bit of acrylic white. Let me show you again one of the finished illustrations in this technique. Now that okay, so here you see. Well, I actually used a lot of the white on this one and decided I didn't like that. So I used much less of it on the next version. This is the one that's going in the book. So the pastel pencil work is quite subtle. Not killing it at all. Now let's go ahead and use a Q-tip and see. I think that's the most common tool that Chris Payne uses the most is I know I keep using brand names, don't we? We're not supposed to say Q-tip if we're broadcasting. We're supposed to say cotton swab. Yeah, whatever. It's a Q-tip. You and I both know that. Kleenex. We're not supposed to say Kleenex. We're supposed to say tissue. We're supposed to say it in that way, too. We all know what we're talking about. It's Kleenex, doggone it. Did you grow up in America? I got in trouble all the time when I was broadcasting with, or recording with Jerry's Artoram. I did a lot of videos for them. Many of you have seen those. And I would say something like Conti Crayon, which is a brand name. They go, doggone, I didn't know it was a brand. I thought they were all called Conti Crayons. No, it's a brand name. And I forget what I was supposed to say instead of that. I completely forget. So I mentioned earlier, again, one of the brilliant aspects of this technique, this approach, is the forced randomness, the forced uncontrolled mild chaos that is happening, because I can't control the exact texture that remains when I pull off the watercolor. Does that make sense? Now I haven't described, let me do this real quickly. So I'm cheating. After this layer, I'm leaving Chris Payne and doing pastel pencils. Okay, what does he do? Again, I have like a dozen videos where I model this on my channel. What he does, the next thing after the watercolor is a very thin layer of oil paint. Believe it or not. I love it. It's so counterintuitive. I would still like to ask him, how did he stumble on this technique? Did he learn it from somebody else, or did he make it up? And if so, how? Who did he learn it from, or how did he stumble on it? Because it's just crazy. Okay, so when I say thin, I mean it. He mixes permanent green light, and I think it's dioxazine purple. It's a purple. He mixes two colors, green and purple. Permanent green light, I'm sure that one, and I believe it's dioxazine violet, which create a beautiful, cool gray. So again, just to help you see the cleverness of his technique. The color, in watercolor, you do a brown glaze or brown wash. That's right, in watercolor it's a wash, not a glaze, right? You do a warm wash, and then in oils you do a cool, not glaze, because it's not transparent, but he applies it very, very thinly. I think just with turpentine or, a fast evaporating. He does not use liquid. He doesn't want it wet. It's very dry. And if you hit it with a hairdryer, it can be dry in less than an hour. He prefers to let it dry overnight. I remember that detail from his, let the acrylic dry overnight. But if he doesn't have time, he can do it really fast. So then he has this thin, sort of muddy layer of gray. And the next thing he does is he lifts off the oil glaze, I'll call it a glaze even though it's not transparent exactly, with a kneaded eraser. Then I believe, and I'm not looking at my notes, so I think he sprays it at that point. Then finishes sometimes, as I understand it, sometimes with acrylics and sometimes with oil paints and colored pencils. Oh yeah, and not pastel pencils, colored pencils. So that's the CF Payne technique for both of you that wanted to know. It's how many people in the world care or want to know. I'm being a weird artist here. There's no doubt about it. All right, let's start working on this man a little bit. So once again, I'm really now starting to think about light areas, dark areas. So the side of his face is going to get sun. Side of his nose. Oh, he has a white shirt, catching a lot of light right there. Since I'm focused at this moment on light and shadow, which way the light is coming from, let me give you one of my oft-repeated rants for you students. You need to learn to be consistent about which way the light is coming from. But that needs to become so second nature and second thought that you get it right almost without thinking about it. Okay, so I guess it takes thinking right at first, but you don't want to burn a lot of calories just getting that right. It's not worth it. I mean, but you have to get it right. Okay, but you don't get credit for getting that right, so to speak. You don't get points for getting that right in my book. You can get disqualified for getting it wrong, get kicked out of the game, so to speak. You get kicked off the field, to use a soccer football analogy. You get kicked off the field for getting that wrong, but you don't get any points on the board for getting it right. And the reason I say that is because I don't want any students to congratulate themselves if they got this answer correct. The answer is, the question is, which way is the light coming from? Don't give yourself points for that, because you haven't done anything except avoid getting kicked out of the game, so to speak. So you can get vetoed for getting it wrong, but you don't get points for getting it right. Because what you get points for is play of light, is dramatic things with light, not which way is the light coming from. Which way is the light coming from is not play of light. And why might be? Because the most important aspect of a painting or an illustration is play of light. And that is not a Dan Nelsonism. That is a art school professor-ism. That's universal, old time, nothing new about that. Play of light. Most important aspect of a painting. So I hope you can see, I hope you agree with me, whether you do or not, too late. I hope you agree with me that this technique, it's creating a charming effect. The roughness, the looseness, the slightly uncontrolled nature of the watercolor when it's lifted out, right? It's not, I'm not controlling it perfectly. I'm controlling it a little bit, right? And I think it's creating, again, the word I'm using is a charming effect. So 2 more layers to go after this one. 1, pastel pencil, and 2, white gouache. Color of gouache if I want it, but usually I don't do any color gouache. Back to a bigger brush. And get some of the brown off these distant trees. Of course, leaving some brown. There's the rub. How much do you rub it? There's the rub. Okay, the last thing I'm going to do, by the way, I do have a perspective problem with his back leg actually up a little too high. Drawing mistake. I think I can fix it. I'm going to try to fix it and basically bring this, cheat a little bit and bring that leg down just a little bit. I'm actually not crazy about that shadow that I did at the last minute. It's showing up too much. But it's not insurmountable. Let me see, do I want a little bit more out of some of these clouds? I think so. By the way, by doing a warm color on top of blue sky, I'm taking advantage of this principle that jumping temperature from one layer to the next often creates very exciting, a very exciting effect. That is, cool sky, warm glaze, jumping the color, not the temperature boundary. And that's part of what makes it so charming, is that I did brown on top of blue. The other works as well. Blue, cool on top of warm. Anytime when you're doing you have one layer on your painting that's warm, like my hand, and then you do cool glaze on top of it, glaze or scumble on top of it. The effect is often very, very charming. All right, break time. I'm going to go downstairs, and I hope that my lacquer mat down in the garage works. And if it does, I'll be back, I think, in just a little while. Now, it is 8:15, and I'm starting to think about supper here. So I think I'll be back in a few minutes, but we'll see. Now, there's a decent chance I may take a break for supper, so I'll be back this evening. Thanks. Hey, surprise, surprise. So I'm back already. I forgot to mention, when I was giving you the play-by-play, the technique that in this next layer, which I've been calling pastel pencil, I can redraw anything that needs to be redrawn. So, indeed. And if you're one of my drawing students, previous drawing, you can see, yes, indeed, I am holding the pencil in the old-fashioned, traditional manner, right? Because this is detail time. I would even say that the real drawing, per se, is already finished. For when I'm doing real drawing, quote unquote, air quotes, I hold the pencil side saddle, so to speak. And yes, my old can of lacquer mat, I've got 2 cans left. It worked just fine. So whew. D-Day has been forestalled. D-Day when I have to decide what I'm going to do when my lacquer mat no longer sprays, when I run out, either one. So the rules of illustration, in my opinion, which is, of course, ever so humble. It's hard to be humble when you're right all the time. I'm sure you know what I mean. The rules of illustration, I think, are essentially the same as the rules for fine art in this regard. I'm gonna define what I'm talking about here in a second. Hang on. I've been saying one of my favorite descriptions of the art journey in the last several weeks, if you've been following me, you've heard me say it, that the first half of our painting journey, we're learning how to paint stuff or draw stuff that looks like stuff, right? Then for many of us, the second half of our journey is learning how to paint stuff that looks like paint. In other words, same thing said in different language. In the early half of our art journey, we're trying to do realism. That's a chore, that's a job, that's a task, has to be done, in my opinion. At least this is ideal. And then the second half of the journey, you're focused more on the actual pastiche of the act of painting, the texture of the paint itself, and the elements of design, line, shape, design, value, texture, color. First half of the journey, paint realism, draw realism. Second half of the journey, draw paintings or draw drawings, so to speak. It's more about the non-realistic aspects of painting. Now, what I was about to say, that's what I've been saying about painting for several weeks now. I've come to realize that the same thing is true, surprise, surprise, who'd have thought, in the world of great illustration. Let's go back to a great 20th century illustrator, N.C. Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth's dad. Those of us who are illustrators know him, revere him. He's one of the gods of illustration in America in the 20th century. Andrew Wyeth's father. Andrew went on to become even more famous than his dad as a watercolorist, super realistic watercolorist. Anyway, N.C. Wyeth, illustrator. I'm trying to think, pirate stories, swashbucklers, maybe Tales of the Arabian Nights, maybe he did that. He did those kinds of children's stories, boys' stories in particular. And for those of you who know his work, all I have to say is N.C. Wyeth, and an image, a style, instantly comes into your mind. And I think that's what I'm talking about. It's not so much, of course he could do realism. He was great at doing realism. He couldn't have been an illustrator if his illustrations weren't realistic. But what really sticks in our mind, I'll just pick on one N.C. Wyeth characteristic. It's those deeply shadowed, hollow, black eye sockets. And again, those of you who know N.C. Wyeth's work, you're going, yeah, that's right. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The hat with the big pirate or whatever, the big floppy hat would come down so far over his forehead that it would completely shadow the eyes. And they were just a big black cavern. Okay, that's N.C. Wyeth. So I'm just using him as an example of, much to my surprise, and I do wish somebody had explained this to me years and years ago. The first half of the illustration journey, finish it with me, is learning how to illustrate stuff that looks like stuff. Second half of the illustration journey is learning how to illustrate stuff that looks like line-shaped values, design, texture, brush strokes, and so on. So, like I said, who'd have thunk it? Because most of us tend to think of illustration as being all about realism. Of course, some of it is. Whoops, I was going to move this leg down, wasn't I? Oops. Okay, not sure what's happening right there. Looks like he's got a leg wrapped. Maybe he does for his shattered hip. Anyway, so I'm mentioning all that partly because I hope that I'm modeling that very thing right here. What is it that I'm most concerned about right now? Is it that I'm trying to capture a, to say the extreme, a photorealistic rendering of a 19th century farmer with a hoe in his field? I think the answer is quite obvious. No, I am not focused on anything close, even remotely related to photorealism. Right? What am I focused on? The incidentals of the illustration. The colors, the lines, the shapes, the composition, the values, the textures. That's what I'm focused on most. That's, of course, I want somebody to look at this and say, oh yeah, farmer in a field. Oh, by the way, now I got his foot lower, but his foot grew about 4 sizes. That won't do. Forgive me. Okay, I've got some things to clean up in the pastel pencil stage. Anyway, I hope. Hey, Bill, thanks for a chat, man. My viewers have been few, and they've been even more quiet than they have been few. So thanks for a comment. I was beginning to wonder if there was really anybody watching or not. Thanks, Bill. And I think I'm about to get my call to supper, since it's 8:40 p.m. Oh, maybe not. So yes, I hope that the most important aspect, what really catches your eye, what I hope would really catch the eye of people who see this illustration is, of course, first of all, they're going to see a farmer with his hoe over his head. But people who are visually sensitive, they'll be, I hope, taken, if that's a good word, they'll be taken with the technique. They'll go, wow, what is that? And it's fine with me if they can't figure out exactly what the technique is. That's certainly, when you look at a Chris Payne illustration, there's no way you can tell how he did that. I looked at his illustrations for years before the advent of the internet and YouTube, that I could go back and do some research on this guy that I first met. I saw his illustrations in person in Dallas in 1987. I had no idea. I didn't get to see him do a demo, so I had no idea how he did those things. So it was really fun here in recent years to take advantage of technology and go back and find out how he did it. So there was no way you could tell just by looking. And I'm glad to say that would be the same case with these illustrations. I don't expect anybody to say, "Oh yeah, I can see how he did that." that would be outrageous. A little more important now that I get the anatomy right. I'm going by memory. A couple weeks ago when I did the earlier illustration, I'll use that as a reference right now. Oh yeah, that's right. They're wearing a big yoke. Yoke's on me, they say. Oh, sorry, I just couldn't resist. I should have resisted, but I didn't. All right, so it looks like a mule. Looks like a man with a plow. The shadows there need a lot of work, but I'll worry about that later. All right, coming right up. Pastel. Adding a little bit of fun texture in here, just for fun. Fun texture just for fun. Redundancies, ladies and gentlemen. Step right up. Step right up. Get your redundancies here. All right, done with that for a while. Let me get you out of the way just a little bit. Get my jar of, or bucket, I guess, of pastels. There we go. And get a pencil sharpener and a wastebasket handy. To use a pastel pencil, you are going to use, oh, you know what? Next time I go to the art store, I must stop by their pastel pencil bin. I'm sure it comes in bins, don't you? Because I don't have the colored blue that I really want here. They're all too dark. Well, except one here that's too light. And this one's too green. Bear with me for a minute. Here's a gray. So it looks like I'm going to have to do that dreaded mixed colors. Oh wait, oh good, here's a pale blue. Hallelujah. He went and got religious on us, Maud. All right. Now the biggest downside of using pastels is that they have to go, if you want them to last, they have to go behind glass. That is a bummer. It's a beautiful effect, beautiful texture. And as you can see, a lot of this, I think a lot of the work in this layer is going to be along this line. You see I'm hugging the shape of the man. I don't need to color the whole cloud. I'll be doing a lot of that. So let's put that as blue aside. Oh, and I need a piece of paper to rest my hand on. Here, let's do some left-handed drawing just for fun. So this is the sunny side of the cloud, and it's fine with me if I go over the black pencil that I just put down a bit, right? Yeah, I'm not bound to or required to color in the lines. But I do quite much like the brown that is in the clouds. Again, slightly counterintuitive, right? Gives it an interesting, dare I say, visually exciting look. You know, us weird artists, we get excited about weird things. What an exciting look. And of course, yes, if I want to, I could break out my regular pastel sticks. I think the last time I did this, I did do that for some of the large areas, like maybe the pale blue. So I might do that, I don't know. But starting to take shape, you see, and I like, I do like covering up some of those black lines, smudging them out a little bit with the white pastel, creating a softer edge. Now I have one more layer, if I choose to do so, which I think I probably will. After this layer, like the edge of these clouds, well, let me go ahead and do one right now just to show you, because you might miss it when I'm doing it later. Find a brush. Oh, as a matter of fact, I don't need to get my gouache out at all. I still have some gesso here that's perfectly fine. Oh, this brush is small enough. No. I think you can barely hear my music in the background. Let me just give you a quick shout out to the people at Epidemic Sound. They've really come through with a product that helps me a great deal. I pay, I don't know, $10 a month or something like that. And they have thousands, I think I read 30,000, 100,000, I don't know. But anyway, little by little I'm going through their collection and creating my own playlists. So at the moment I have about 12, 13 hours of music that I like. And so that keeps me from getting in trouble with YouTube about copyright. because I'm paying for the music and it's all, copyright's all taken care of. So cool, huh? Plus, it helps me because it plays in the background and just helps me stay a little bit mellow. When I'm not broadcasting, though, I don't, for what it's worth, I don't listen to music. I listen to, did I say when I'm not broadcasting? That's what I mean to say. I'm typically listening to either YouTubes or podcasts. History, theology, philosophy, science. Generally. Pretty. Okay, thanks. Be there in a second. The kind of stuff that smart people like to listen to. You, my friend, have just been snobbed upon. Sorry, I have a tissue for that. I really don't like snobbery unless I'm the one doing it. Then it's okay. We have a special dispensation for me. I can't stand snobbery. Except when I'm the one doing it. That's different. That's very different, of course. Anyway, so there. That's what I'm going to do. I just wanted to demonstrate, and I'll do that wherever I think it's necessary. But I have been called for supper, and I'm gonna. That's a haul. That's a call. I'm going to heed, not a haul. That's a call. I'm going to heed. A little more of a shadow there. All right, I've got, some ways to go, but I've made pretty good progress in this, whatever it's been, 2 hours, something like that. Illustration nearly finished. Well, 75%, 80%. Yeah, maybe 85. All right, but it's time for supper. So I think I'll end this broadcast here because when I come back, I'm not sure that I'll be up to broadcasting. Maybe I will. But if so, I'll make it separate. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, share, subscribe, like. If you didn't like it, let's keep that just between you and me. Sorry. Some of you newcomers, who is this guy who's talking? Who's this guy who rambles on and on and on and on? That's me. Dan. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.